welcome to the One More Thing podcast. I'm Dr. Troy Doucet, and I'm joined with Dr. Larry Baucom.
Good morning.
Good morning. So week 4, Summer at the Lake was this week. You were back up on stage. I say you're not the OG, you're the OD, the original doctor
Yeah, right.
of Suncoast. And I was thinking last night, before getting my thoughts together about what to talk about. But you and I, we have the highest degree of education you could have, a PhD, but we wear that education lightly because we try to make this idea of following Jesus very practical.
Right.
And there's a way to complicate these ideas of what it means to be a follower of Christ and all these theological doctrines and creeds that we don't shun them, but we're kind of like, these are not like the quintessential things. And I thought of that because your first point that you made, I thought was a really interesting point. And it's one I think we say in many ways around here at Suncoast. You said, following Jesus is not merely an intellectual sort of assent or an intellectual truth that one has to follow. Explain that. What do you mean by that?
Well, it seems like in my past, in my history, it was all about what you know.
Right.
So what you really need to do, let me introduce you to these concepts and let me teach you, the Bible says this, the Bible says that, and all of a sudden you begin to learn, well, this is our evangelical box, and we don't, we take issue with that other box. Maybe it's a different denomination, let's use Baptist because, there's more Baptists in the world than there are people.
Right.
But with the Baptists, we're not like the Baptists, or we're not like the Presbyterians. We're not like, the Episcopalians. I mean, Episcopalians.
That's right.
But what we did have, we had this tribalism of intellectual, and it was just our own little niche of intellectualism. But sometimes following Jesus is not about having your doctrines or your creeds or everything in order. So I can argue propitiation and expiation, atonement theories, and ad nauseum, and I mean that ad nauseum exactly the way it means, because some people don't care. We used to talk about once saved, always saved, eternal security, whether you're premillennial, the second coming, premillennial, post-millennial. Early on, I took the position of pan-millennial. So what does that mean? It's going to pan out.
That's right.
I don't know. But there's so many people.
Yeah.
And there's words like dispensationalism, different dispensations of time, dispensation of law, dispensation of grace, premillennial, post-millennial, like we just mentioned. But all these different theological nuances, the person who comes in on a weekly basis, they really are looking for, first of all, keep it simple.
Yeah.
And make it practical.
Yeah.
My heart's broken this week. We've had 2 people that I know that passed away this week, and I'm meeting with someone tomorrow who has a brain tumor, and it's not good. I'm going to go visit with them in their home because the prognosis was 6 months, 2.5 years ago, and now it's gotten to the point to where she's finally understanding that it's probably terminal, and how do I help her when I talk about intellectual truth?
Right.
What I really want to do is guide her through the valley of the shadow of death, to know that God is in the boat of her life, that she's cared for, and that no matter what happens when we transition from this life to the life beyond, that our hand is in His.
Yeah.
But no amount of intellectual doctrine is what she's looking for, nor is it what I'm looking for.
That's right.
Or people say things theologically, whole theodicy type thing. Oh, God did this for that. People don't need instruction during this hour. They just need somebody that will weep with them, that will hurt with them, and love them.
That's it.
And I think that's not just in that circumstance, but most of the circumstances of our life are more practical. Follow Jesus is not an intellectual ascent. It's simply saying, I'm going to try to love other people and be kind.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a heads up for me to know that.
It's funny, man, like the way you say it, because we have that in our repertoire of, education, like all these different theories and whatnot that we've read, all these different philosophies. But what does it take to get to that point where, you go through this rigorous process of seeking this intellectual achievement to where you get to that point? Because I was in the Jeep yesterday with Asher. We were going fishing, of course. And he looked at me and he just kind of said, Dad, what do you seek? what are you looking for? Moving out here to Florida, all of these things. And I looked at him. I was like, it's a good question, dude. And I said, peace. So there's going to come a point in your life, dude, where you're going to seek more than anything, just peace. Peace with yourself, peace with others. And it's almost as though like those people who live in that realm of Christianity as an apologetical methodology or an intellectual assent, like we win, you lose, we're right, you're wrong. There doesn't seem to be much peace in that.
No.
At all. The next thing you brought up in the sermon, which was, quite controversial if you listen to it the way you spoke it, was the idea of the miracle, the quote-unquote miracle of provision begins when we actually share.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people will look at that story of feeding the 5,000 and immediately go, well, yeah, Jesus just took the bread and multiplied it. It never ran out. But you have a different sort of take on what most likely happened is a wave of...
And I really didn't want to get into that too much this week.
Yeah.
I'll tease it because we're going into the 7 signs.
That's right.
In the Gospel of John. And we're going to revisit this story again.
Yeah.
So I wanted to leave some food on the table.
There you go.
And leaving it on the table, simply we'll talk about, the miracle of provision. How did he do it?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. And the answer could be multiple answers. But whether you take the answer of being that he broke the bread, and as soon as he did, he broke it again. He just kept breaking it, and it always was a half there, and he just kept passing it out. He was like this manufacturing chute of bread and fish.
Yeah.
He just came pouring out. I think that's probably not it's not as logical, and I'll tease at this, but I do think that when we begin to share, I like to talk about the fact that when a mom goes to a place with her kids, she is prepared to feed them, and usually more food than what she needs.
Yeah,
it's true with my wife. It's true with our grandkids. We have a abundance of food when they're around.
Yeah,
and if all of a sudden people came over and said, well, "Let's begin to share what we have," it would be abundance. And the miracle of provision is simply that my heart is open to where I give of my resources to help others. I think the provision of Suncoast is, we give away a lot of cars, we give away a lot of money, we help a lot of people in need. That's the miracle, is that your heart and my heart are so willing to say, hey, what I have is God's.
Yeah.
And once I share it with him, it seems like those who are undernourished, underprivileged, they seem to have a little bit more. I remember talking to a guy that was making millions a year. I think his income was $10 million a year. And I had lunch with him one day in Sarasota, and I said, $10 million a year. Holy cow! He was a professional athlete, and I said, that's fantastic. I said, you just have, you can do whatever you want. I mean, how does it feel to have this much provision to where you can do whatever? And he goes, yeah. He said, I know. He said, you and I, and he included me in it. He said, we just have all the resource we ever need. There's nothing that you and I can't do with the resources we have. And he included me in this $10 million. I don't make $10 million a year. I don't make $1 million a year. But the reality is I have everything I need and more.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely right.
Yeah.
And it was very convicting for me at that point to go, man, why should I expect a guy that makes that to do any more or less than I do?
Yeah.
I just need to do my best, and then I can challenge everyone to do their best and see what happens.
Yeah.
So, but it's a good eye-opener. We're blessed beyond we ever dream.
I love that point that you made yesterday, even though it wasn't, I think it stemmed from one of your points, was the idea is there's a danger in comparison, right? That even with what you have, like the woman who gave the two pennies, Jesus, she gave the most.
Right.
Because the heart behind it, she gave from what she had. And I remember having a conversation with a guy, Florida State guy, Charlie Ward. He won the Heisman Trophy, in 93 or 92. And he was a speaker at one of our events. And I'd asked him about how does he reconcile being extremely wealthy with the call to Christ to provide for people who are less fortunate. And I'll never forget what he said. He goes, all of my contracts with the Knicks and whatnot have allowed me to do that. To provide for my family, to provide for friends, to give to the less fortunate. And he goes, But simply because I can do it at this level doesn't make it any more important than those who could do it at maybe a level of a meal here or something there. And to hear him say that, you could hear the purity of his heart to really want to follow Christ in that way. And I think that's what you were challenging the congregation to do, is don't compare, but give from the resources you have and watch what God can do. So what do you say to someone who says, the people out there who say, it's mine.
Yeah.
I worked hard for this.
Yeah.
Why should I?
I would remind them of core value number 3 for Suncoast. And our value is everyone brings something to the table. Mm-hmm. Now, what you have that you bring to the table is entirely different than what I bring or what someone else brings, but we all bring something to the table. And he who dies with the most toys wins is not a good bumper sticker. I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to pass from this life to the life beyond, and don't you want to make a difference? And being truly human, I think Jesus was helping us to understand, it's not the religious system. It's not the system of keeping everything for me, the haves and the have-nots. Mm-hmm. I'm blessed. Leave the sinners alone. They're the damaged ones. But to see people in that need base and be able to provide for those needs, Jesus saw these common folk gathering around to hear what he had to say, and I love the challenge to his disciples, and you feed them. Yeah. And they go, what the heck? You got to be kidding me. Can't do it. He goes, yes, you can. And I missed the story. I told it at 9 o'clock. It's one of those ad-lib stories that comes and falls out of the notes, but about the guy that was in church, that he stood up in his home church and said, hey, I remember years ago when God touched my heart here, I gave every dollar I had, both dollars, I put my all in, and now I stand here, God has blessed me with $1 million. But it's because I was obedient to him then. And everybody sort of applauded. He sits down, and a little old lady beside him says, yeah, I dare you to do it again. I mean, give it all again. Yeah. And the thing is, there are times in our life where we make this point of gift or surrender, and then we forget that should be an ongoing process of our lives, that we continue to give, continue to be faithful, good stewards. I would say not be foolish, but on the other hand, I think rarely are we too generous. Yeah, that's a good point. So, awesome. It was an amazing sermon, man. Amazing truth that was just proclaimed. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah. So and thanks for being on One More Thing. No problem. This week the teaser is, what do you do? The 4 friends bring their paralytic friend to Jesus. Oh. And what happens? Now, I'm not going to talk about this, but in other places they lower him through the house. And I always wondered, you dig a hole in someone's roof, you drop him through. Damage their property. And it doesn't talk about this, but who fixed the roof? It's a good question, isn't it? That's a good question. I don't know how it fits in the sermon, but I scratch my head. Who fixed the roof? Maybe someday I'll be able to try to evaluate that from a historic perspective and try to figure out what really happened. But maybe it's not really the point of the story at all. But anyway, it'll be fun this week. It'll be good. Can't wait. Yeah, me too. Thanks Dr. Baucom.